Victorians are now the most highly taxed Australians by a very long way. And this is all to try and rein in 10 years of Labor debt. Now, the numbers are eye-watering, and the inability of Labor in Victoria to even address the issue is completely out of control. State debt, have a listen to this, is headed toward $200 billion by 2029. Incredibly, Victorians are paying $20.7 million a day to service the interest alone. Now, that's almost $1 million an hour. All this in a week where a state budget was handed down by a treasurer who doesn't seem to me to know what she's doing, Jacqueline Symes, a budget full of more spending, including free public transport for school students who don't pay to travel on the tram anyway, as far as I can work out. Next year, of course, is an election year. Joining me now, Deputy Liberal Leader Sam Groth. Good to catch up with you again. Those numbers don't lie. What was in that budget to fix it?
Well, Steve, thank you for having me on again. And you're right, absolutely nothing other than more tax for Victorians to pay. We went through some of those numbers there. $194 billion of debt forecast by 28-29, and those interest numbers that you quoted, well, they're the current ones. By 28-29, it's going to be $1.2 million an hour, nearly $29 million a day. And what do Victorians get for it? As you said, highest taxed state in the nation. The tax take over the next 4 years is going to push $180 billion. Every single Victorian's paying for a Labor government that cannot manage money.
So what happens, Sam, when Jacqueline Symes turns up in New York at Standard & Poor's, knocks on the door and they say, well, you've got a big problem on your hands. We're going to actually downgrade your credit rating. What's the repayment on the interest rate end up being then?
Look, the responsible thing from the Treasurer would have been to deliver a responsible budget. Now, I don't begrudge any minister or anyone travelling overseas if it is in the best interests of Victoria and you're securing investment in this state. We need to grow our way out of this mess that's been created. That's fine. But to go over and announce a trip a day after the budget to travel to New York to clean up a mess that should have been cleaned up on budget day is not the right way to operate the state's books. And I hope for every Victorian's sake we do not get a downgrade. We don't want to be paying more interest than we currently already are. We want to be able to service that debt in a responsible way, but it's the responsibility of the government to actually deliver a responsible budget and not to go begging on its hands and knees after they've delivered what they've delivered.
Sam, I imagine you weren't surprised at the anger over the ridiculously named Emergency Services and Volunteers levy. Your side of politics already said you'll dump that. You have to feel for farmers and people who don't donate their time to the CFA. They're going to be whacked with yet another tax.
Well, can I just say, first of all, Steve, that we stand with the farmers and we completely understand, we're not in their shoes, but we understand and we acknowledge the heartache and the tough times that some of the farmers are going through in regional areas at the moment with the drought. But for the un-Labor government to go and impose a tax that they hide as a volunteers fund, a fund that's going to support emergency services, let's be very clear, our emergency services are a core government business and have always been handled out of consolidated revenue. This is about moving the emergency services and the cost of those off the government's books and putting in a tax that is going to hit every resident, every householder, every renter, every business, every commercial property with a 100% increase. And then those farmers you mentioned, 150% increase on their fire services levy. And we were proud to stand beside our farmers and our volunteers on the steps of Parliament this week with Brad Batten, Leader of the Liberal Party, Leader of the Opposition, and Danny O'Brien, the Leader of the Nationals, to announce that if we are elected in November 2026, we will repeal that tax, we will scrap it, and we'll go back to a more fair and equitable tax system. And one thing I can commit, Steve, to you and to the listeners, is that under us, under a Liberal and Nationals government, taxes will always be cheaper under a government that we lead.
The other tax that is really ripping Victoria apart and destroying the real estate market is land tax. Now, your seat covers, you're my local member, so your seat covers the Mornington Peninsula. I mean, the amount of properties that are for sale now because people simply can't afford to have a second residence. The land tax, the amount of money people are paying is just incredible.
It's staggering. Land tax is one we need to have a look at. Obviously, the Fire Services Levy, the Emergency Services Volunteers Fund, I've already mentioned. We need to have a look at the tax system here in Victoria as a whole. It is not sustainable to continue to tax Victorians at the rate that we are. And as I said, $180 billion over the next 4 years is going to be the tax take from the state government. It's not fair that that money keeps getting pulled out of the pockets of Victorians. And honestly, Steve, a lot of people that buy a second property, I have a lot in my electorate, don't get me wrong, but they are people, they are teachers, they are police officers, they are tradies who have decided to put the little bit that they've squirreled away into property instead of in the share market or instead of into a super fund. That is their self-managed money. It is not fair to continually go after these people, and the Labor government goes after Victorians, they go after anything that is not tied down purely because they haven't been able to manage the budget over the last 10 years.
Sam, always great to catch up. Thanks for joining us on this Friday.